So welcome to our podcast.
Coffee Side Chat. Yep.
I'm Janelle,
I'm Malik.
and this is our podcast about anything and everything and whatever we want to talk about. Just what two friends would talk about over a cup of coffee, even though we're separated by several thousand miles.
Just a couple. Just a couple.
Just a couple. I don't actually know how many miles it is. I'm gonna put that in. In the meantime, what are you drinking?
Bringing back the San Angelo style coffee that is a Texas Roasters blend down here. Figured, I had some left, so might as well use that because I haven't been to the store to buy any more coffee lately. So that's a problem. I'm running low, dangerously low, so I'm going to have to remedy that tomorrow. What are you drinking?
I asked the person who made the coffee this morning what it was, and he said, I think it's Pete's. I don't know anything else about it because they put all of it in the grinder and then throw the bag away. So then I don't know what it is.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I have little airtight containers that I label so that I can keep track of how many different blends I have. So, it works for me.
I just remembered and I forgot to tell you. This should have been the first thing I said. I bought an espresso maker.
What? What? You bought an espresso maker? I cannot believe this.
It was a part of my marketplace binging the other day, and it was $20. It comes with a milk steamer. I haven't used it yet, but I'm like, now I have to get a grinder, and I have to start buying whole beans so that I can use my fancy espresso maker.
You know what? Sometimes whatever trigger there is, you just got to take it.
So I'm super excited. It is 2,137 miles from my house to your city. I don't remember your address, so I didn't put that in. It takes 1 day and 7 hours if you go through Los Angeles. But we all know going through Los Angeles means that it's actually going to take 1 day and 10 hours because the traffic in LA is garbage 100% of the time unless you're traveling between the hours of 1 and 4 a.m.
So that means I need to leave at the time to get there at between 1 and 4.
Yeah, 2,137 miles. I forgot that number / didn't remember it. / I know I've looked it up before. That's a lot of hours, a lot of miles.
Yeah, that's a lot.
But we can still sit and have coffee together and talk about things that we would normally talk about over a cup of coffee at one of our favorite coffee shops, which neither of us live anywhere close to any of our favorite coffee shops anymore.
Absolutely. And so today we're going to talk about our money story. So, yeah, something basically, what our relationship has been with money, how do we view it growing up, and what are we doing now that we're, quote unquote adults to make it better for ourselves. So, yeah.
Growing up, I don't know if this was your situation, but I didn't realize that we were poor until one of my sisters said later that when somebody came home with a bag of clothes, we didn't ask where it was from. We asked who it was from because all of our clothes came from like grab bags. Like somebody would pack up stuff they were getting rid of and give it to our family. And that's where we got most of our clothes. And I didn't think anything of it until my sister mentioned that. I was like, whoa. So we did not have a lot of money growing up. We never did. But that's what happens when you have 13 children. I was going to say, and one parent working. I'm like, there's no way you could have both parents working. Then you have to pay for daycare for 13 kids. No.
That's wild. Yeah. Things are going to be a little bit thin at that point when you have that many kids.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. For me, it was for a long time, we never really talked about money. It just was, we got what we got when we got it. And sometimes you were told no, sometimes you were told yes. So you never really considered, okay, do we have a lot of money or not? Sometimes it was just, no, you can't have that right now because we have other things to buy. Like if you needed school clothes, well, guess what? You're not going to get all the other casual clothes you want at that exact moment. You got to wait. So when I was growing up, it was never really, we didn't really talk about it so much until I was 16 or 17. That's when it started becoming more to the forefront, especially because, as we all know, I have kind of expensive taste. So I like to buy things that are maybe overpriced to some people, but in my opinion, quality. So And at that point, it was like, well, you want all this stuff, you need to get a job. Because if you don't, you're not getting the stuff you want. And so that for me, that was my biggest push to get a job, because I was like, look, I don't want to have to ask for anything. If I wanted to get a new cell phone, I just want to get it. If I want new shoes, new clothes, a new backpack, a watch I don't really need, anything like that. It's like, gotta have a job. So I started working at a gelateria, which is an Italian ice cream shop, when I was 17. Two of my friends had already started working there. And so basically it became a second hangout for all of us because one of my friends knew the owner's family. So he basically just hired all of us to work there, which was great.
I think I had a fairly almost similar situation when I was like 11 or 12. My niece started dance classes and I wanted to do dance classes so bad. And so my sister-in-law was like, well, it's only $35 a month. Like, if you can find a way to make $35 a month, then, like, I'll take you, or we'll figure it out. I was like, oh, that'll be so great. And I was so excited. And then trying to figure out how to make $35 a month when you're 11 or 12 and you don't know anybody and you live out in the middle of nowhere. Yeah, that was a challenge. I was like, I can't figure this out. And Mom wasn't like, I wasn't going to be able to earn $35 a month in chores. I was going to have to find $35 a month from somebody else, and I didn't have those resources because we had just moved to Texas, so I didn't know anybody.
Yeah, because chores are free. Chores, you don't get paid for chores almost
right.
ever.
There were like secondary chores you could do. That it was like, okay, if you go above and beyond and do these extra things that I need done, then you'll make like $1 or $2. So I'd have to Mom would have to find 35 extra things, and I would have to do all of them every single month.
On your own, to make sure that you got all the money.
Uh-huh. And it was always like, I'll give you $2 for weeding the entire garden. Like,
yeah, that's some work right there. Ooh, weeding, that is not a fun job anybody wants.
Yeah, and there just weren't a lot of those jobs to begin with. So yeah, that was like my first understanding of money. When I was very little, like I just didn't understand like value of things either. So it was like, yeah, a balloon toy is a perfectly acceptable Christmas gift. Like I tried to give that to one of my sisters for Christmas one year, and Mom was like, no.
Probably not.
So yeah, I did not have a good understanding of money growing up. And like when we moved and that whole fiasco, because we moved right in the middle of, or like right at the beginning of the recession. So I think we moved in 2007 or 2008. And then the recession really hit, and it like started hitting Ohio before a lot of other places, I think. And yeah, so like we just did not have very much money. And I just kind of like, this is normal. And then I got older, I was like, oh, that's not normal.
Yeah, things change. The older you get, the more you go to your friend's house. Like I remember when I went to my friend's house who had a 3-story house. I was just like, mind completely blown, because we lived in a 2-story house with my grandparents, and so I'd seen 2-story houses. I didn't even the thought of a 3-story house didn't even cross my mind that they were a thing. And then I went to my friend's house, and their whole 3rd floor was like a rec room. It was the most stunning thing I'd seen. It's like, yep, okay, so there's a different class sometimes that you run into, and it's just weird that it happened to be only one person in my entire school that I knew with that kind of situation. So
yeah, I think when I got to high school, so I was homeschooled, and like everything we had was secondhand most of the time, which growing up, like I did not mind. That was totally fine for me. I did not care. I don't remember where I was going with that.
Something about your high school experience, maybe?
Oh yeah. Thanks for reminding me. But in my high school, I felt like that was actually a fairly common experience. There were a lot of kids that I knew, especially like some of my closer friends, that had like whatever they needed and whatever they wanted. They were like had 1 or 2 siblings maybe, and their family made pretty good money. And then there were a lot of other friends that were also like in my close friend circle who had hand-me-downs from their one sister who didn't ever really get new clothes, and when they did, they were like really cheap things. and had like an old phone and like knew they weren't going to get a car because their parents couldn't drive them to work because their one parent was driving to work themselves and couldn't take them with them. And yeah, I feel like my school specifically, I don't know about anybody else's, but like that was a very common experience. And then I had roommates in college and after college who did not understand that experience, who grew up like pretty wealthy their whole lives. And like the poorest they'd ever been was their parents bought them like less clothes one year rather than no clothes.
Yeah. It's a completely different experience when you are used to getting hand-me-downs, and it's like just what it is, you know. And I got a lot from my uncle. Like he would just have like polos and stuff like that. He's like, all right, I'm not gonna wear this anymore. You can have it, and I was completely fine with that, mainly because he kept really, really good care of his clothes, so they were always in good condition. So for me, I was like, these are new. They're not faded. There's nothing wrong with them. I'm gonna wear them like there's no big deal. And yeah, when you start realizing that there's a lot of people who they just always get new stuff, especially when school's about to start, and you go like we talked about in our education one where you talk about the uniforms, and then uniforms even like there's like the regular uniforms you can grab at like Walmart, and then there's everyone who wears like the Dickies and the Polo like brand. It's like, okay, there's a lot of different levels that you don't really realize until you get a little bit older and you start really paying attention. But when you're younger, you don't really care. Does it, do I like the way it looks? Does it fit? Bam. And you just move on with your life. So
I think I was very fortunate in the sense of like I wasn't surrounded by people who noticed and or made fun of those things. Like I'm sure a lot of kids struggle with that in that like if you have the Walmart brand of uniform or you have like clearly hand-me-down clothes or your clothes are a little bit older, like some kids might make fun of you, but I was very fortunate to not have that.
and then you look at, after I got my first job, it's like money management. What's that supposed to be? The first summer, me and all my friends were working. We all played tennis together, so we get off from tennis, go shower, go to work, and so we all worked through basically throughout the entire summer. And the amount of money we spent on just silly foolishness. We would go to eat all over the place. We would just drive around. We would literally just drive around, stopping at different restaurants and just eating more food. We just threw away hundreds and hundreds of dollars that first summer. It didn't make any sense. We got to the end. It's like, where did all the money go? And we realized, yeah, we had just been, spending money away, and it was so silly. And my mom tried to kind of give me some kind of concept of, bills. So, she would like, hey, you got to pay me this much out of each check, right? And, begrudgingly, you'll do it because mom's like, fine. But yeah, it was just whole managing, having bills, doing anything like that. I was not here for any of that foolishness. Although I didn't have a car too, so it was like, cool. I just ride with people, give them some gas money, and we just go on the town, go to the mall. Like geez, the amount of money I wasted the years. I was buying $80 backpacks for fun, just because. All right, cool. I want a new backpack. This one's fine. Just go buy it off the rack, like no biggie. I wasn't trying to look for sales, discounts, nothing. It was like straight off the rack, highest price it can be. Didn't care. It was so dumb.
Yeah, having a job when you're still living at home and you have no bills, like even having a car. I got a used car and it was like $3,000. I was able to pay that off in a year. It was not a big deal. And then my insurance was like $25. I barely count that as a bill. So like any money that I made on top of the car was just my money. And I just got to use it however I wanted. It was like, oh, okay, dope. I'll use that. It wasn't until I got to college that I really was like, oh shoot, this is a bill. This is what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck every once in a while. Cause like even working at where was I? I think it was my first year at Home Depot. I was still living at home, and one time I like forgot to pick up a check or something, and it was like a week and a half later that I was like, oh shoot, I gotta go get that. And I remember people at the counter giving it to me were saying, man, that must be really nice to not have to worry about like when you get your next check to be comfortable enough to not have to worry about it. And I didn't understand that comment at the time. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, what do you mean you don't have enough money? But I also was like, I work part-time. I live at home. I don't have kids. I don't have a house. I
Oh,
had to pay tuition and that was it. And that was expensive, but it still wasn't unreasonable.
yeah.
I could
I
make
would
that
say
work.
I would say that's probably was my first like bill as well, like tuition. Like it's the first thing when I got to college. It's like, okay, this is a larger sum of money. You have to make sure it's paid, or you can't go to school. Because even I didn't get a car note until I was 24. So it was like my first like real bill was tuition and then rent, then electricity, and you start realizing, oh my goodness, like I have no clue. And I was 18, 19, and then suddenly it was like, hey, guess what? All of these things that have to be paid, they're on you, buddy. There's no one else to call or deal with. Like you have to figure out how you're gonna still eat, still make it to class on time, and still make sure the gas, electricity, rent, and your tuition are all paid. And even if that just meant, all right, well, you have your student loans, you still have to go write the check. You still have to make sure you click the button that says pay, or guess what? They will kick you out of class. It was, things changed real quick at 19. Luckily,
Hmm.
I didn't miss too many, but it definitely changed quick.
I don't think I missed any. Like I can't think of any that I just straight up missed. But tuition was weird for me. Like I barely count that as a true bill because like I didn't have to think about it every month. And it was like, oh, eventually I'm gonna have to pay that. And if I can't pay the whole thing, especially when I got to UT, I was like, oh, if I can't pay it, like there are loans and I can like use a loan to cover what I can't cover. And so it was still like, that's a bill for future me. Whereas rent was like, I gotta pay this month. And so that wasn't until I turned 19 and moved to Austin because I stayed home the first year. And then moving to Austin or having a bill every month and then having a car on top of it. So I had my first car note I think it was when I was 19. Yeah. Yeah. Um, that was the first because that was like $150 a month. And then insurance on top of that was also stupid expensive. I don't know why the insurance on that car was so expensive at first. Um, and then having rent. And my first apartment, I didn't have to pay any utilities, which was awesome. But then also having to figure out how to buy groceries for myself. I was like, I have to learn how to be an adult and pay to be an adult at the same time. Hang on.
Felt like felt like you were swindled. It's like someone lied to me.
Yeah, not fair. Um, when was the first time you thought, shoot, I don't know anything about money?
Oh yeah, I would probably say yeah, about 19. About that was that first time I was like, okay, how did these things supposed to work? And then like when you work in high school, you see that you do have taxes taken out of your check, but it was not a consequential amount of money. When you have other bills, it's like, oh crap, I hate taxes. Taxes suck. It's like this sucks so bad. I hate all of this. This is terrible. Oh well, just pay the bills. You get over it pretty quickly, but yeah, it's definitely like this is not great.
Yeah, I think it was when somebody was like, oh, you have to pay taxes every year. When I was like 16, then I was like, why does money work that way? I don't understand. Like, what? This is so dumb. And then getting into economics class in high school, and they were talking about stock and investing in stock, and I was like, I can't understand how you like. It just sounds like this fake thing that somebody invented this weird game, and somehow you get into this private circle to play with real money, this weird game that doesn't actually mean anything, but you somehow make money off of it. It's still a head scratcher for me, even though I'm like trying to get into it. I'm still like, what?
Yeah, I understand. I understand that feeling.
Yeah, that was probably the first time. And then I still ask that question. There was the first time I asked that question, and there are a lot of times still to this day that I'm like, what in the world?
It's happening. Yep.
um, oh, who was I talking to? Like friends my age are already talking about investing in their retirement, and I'm like, oh, I have not done any of that.
What was so funny is I started accidentally investing into a 401k when I was working when I was working at Office Depot. I apparently had signed up to have some of my check put into a 401k. Had no idea. Like I wasn't even really, because back then like my number of bills, the total amount wasn't that high, so I wasn't even like looking at my pay stub that often. And then come to find out, oh look, I have been putting into this 401k for 3 years, had no idea. So when I left there, it rolled over. So it was just like, oh, okay. I guess there is some money in there. Now, mind you, I haven't started again since I've been at Home Depot, which is silly, but I have to get back on that at some point.
It's so the whole concept of having to save for retirement with like specific retirement funds is so odd to me. And there's like so many different I've tried to read up on this on quite a bit, but it's just weird. There's like savings accounts where you pay your taxes on it now, and there's savings accounts where you pay on your taxes when you take it out, or there's somewhere you there aren't very many where you set it and forget it. Almost all of them you have to like keep contributing every month, and there's like penalties if you put too much in at a time. There's penalties if you don't put enough in. And there's just so many different levels and names, and so you have to figure out like which account type works. And then you have to decide which bank do you trust with that account type. And then you have to like there are just so many different levels of what am I doing? And there's like how much money do you think you'll make in the future? That determines which kind of account you should probably get. Is it worth it to get two different kinds of accounts? So I actually have a reminder in my phone for today to open a high yield savings account just because I'm like, I've got a little bit of money right now. And as long as I have a little bit of money, I should just like set it aside so I can't touch it until I really need it. And high yield savings accounts are like, from my understanding, and somebody who listens will probably call me out and be like, actually, that's not how that works. But it seems more accessible than a retirement fund because there's like penalties for taking it out early. So it's like, this is your money, but you can't touch it until you turn 65. Like, what in the world? But I'm like, I'll put that money aside. So if I need to pay for some big expenditure like a wedding in the future or something, or just like any other big thing that I want to save for, I need to be thinking about. I'm like, a high yield savings account seems like the safest way to do it. But right now, so like with all I like read about money a lot, and I still feel like I do not understand any of it. But I was reading about high yield savings accounts the other day, HYAs, and their rates are like 10 times higher than normal savings accounts rates. So like I have a savings account with my bank, and like it's like 0.25% or something, which is high, but it's like way higher or way lower than a normal high yield account savings rate, which is like 2.2% or something. But with all of the economic downturn that's going on, those are dropping too. And everybody was like, oh, those are safe, those are safe, those are safe. And then just in the last like week, they're like, shoot, we're going to dip too. So now they're down to like 1.3% or something, which is still really high, but it's like way lower than it was a month ago. Like half, almost. This is one of the times where I was like, oh, I don't know anything. Was when one of my friends told me that he had invested and like he lives very luxuriously. Like he has a super nice car, puts a ton of money into it, and just lives high on the hog. Does not flinch when he spends money. Whereas I'm like, what's the cheapest version to buy this thing? And he said that he got most of his money from investing in stocks. And so I'm like, he's only like a year older than me, maybe. He might actually be younger than me. And I know nothing. And so my immediate response is like, just pretend it doesn't exist. My secondary response is, what do I do to try to get an increment of what he knows?
Yeah, that can be kind of tough because I don't really know a lot of people who do a lot of investing. I know some of my friends who've been given stock by their parents and they've sold it off or kind of kept it. So it's like, I'm not sure really what to do with that. Now it's like they're, like the easiest way to, easiest thing to comprehend is obviously just using a high yield savings account. Just do it that way and just write it, and then you don't have to think about the, investment part. Oh yeah, some of my friends have been giving stock from their parents, which is a kind of a cool investment to have. Just like, okay, I know like Apple stock or whatever. This is probably gonna make some money over time, so I'll just set it aside and then give it to my kids whenever. It's like that's an interesting way to do it. But it's like I don't really want to put in the energy to learn like all the ins and outs of investing. So I'm really tempted to just be like, okay, here, someone who's a professional, this is $1,000. Invest it wherever it needs to go and just make some money on it. And I'll pay you a fee or whatever. But just make it that lot easier that way versus trying to go through and understand everything myself. But you got to be careful on those, making sure the investment person is really reputable because you don't want someone just siphoning off your money and having no idea. So there's that.
Yeah. Which it used to be like you had to do it that way. You had to have somebody else invest for you, or you had to like have a degree basically. But now there are so many ways that you can do it yourself, and it saves you so much money in the sense of like you're not paying those bills or those like fees, which are sometimes stupid high. And a lot of those companies are actually pulling back because they're realizing a lot of people, especially in your and my age group, are not using those people because we either don't have enough money, because normally what I've seen, the minimum investment is 1,500 to start. And that's like somebody's like, I guess I'll take your 1,500 and put it in. I'd rather have 20,000, but I'll take your 15. um so that's like the bare minimum. So if you don't have $1,500, what are you supposed to do? Like, and you lose money. That's the most frustrating thing, is that the longer that you wait to even touch it, the worse it is for you. And that's so frustrating to me because I'm like, like my little brother, he's 20 this year. Like he just turned 20 2 months ago. And I remember noticing that he had like 2 credit cards already and was working on building his credit when he was like 18. And I was still like, oh, I have a debit card and that's it. And I just felt so behind. And then I checked my credit score and I was like, oh, this is not gonna work. I gotta start working on this. Which is why I had a reminder to open a high yield savings account now, because then it will not ding my report the same way, because there's something, I don't remember if it's like number of years since I've had somebody check my credit score or something. I think that's what it is. So then it'll be the same and it won't affect my score. But like he just seemed like he was so on top of it. I was like, oh no, I'm behind.
Yeah, it gets that way. I didn't, when you start looking at the credit score, I was like, oh man, my credit score was going really, really good. It's like, oh, it's like 750. I'm like, all right, good. Because I had just started like spending, like doing anything with credit at all. And then things got out of hand. So working on getting it back to 750, which is the fun part. Oh yeah, definitely made some silly mistakes there, like accepting a credit card that had a automatic bump in the amount you could spend, and then subsequently spending all of that new limit, which was a terrible idea. But it was fine. I made it work.
I've always been told, or at least read, that you should set a different limit for yourself. So if your limit is $1,000, then you should set a 10 or 30% limit. And you shouldn't spend more than 30% of that. So if you've got $1,000 limit, you should tell yourself, my credit card is only worth $300. That's what I've always thought and what I've always been telling myself. Except my limit is more than 1,000 now. I'm like, I don't spend that much money. So it looks like I don't spend any money because I'm like, I just don't use my card that much. I don't spend that much money anyway. So when this whole quarantine thing started, my credit score dipped lower than it's been in a long time, just because. And then just in the last week, it went higher than it's ever been. And I think it's because like I did not use my credit card at all for a month. And then I started using it again, and they're like, oh, she's still alive, she still works. Like, we'll give her score back. It was
like,
so
okay.
stressful, though.
It's like, yeah, that money's not being wasted now. Good.
It was so scary, though, because, like, there was no explanation for it. It was just like, oh, your credit score dipped by a lot. It was like 40 points.
Yeah, and it's so hard to find like the explanations for it. Like sites do an okay job, but if they decide, any of the credit bureaus decide to change any of the way they're calculating things, it kind of messes you up because you get used to certain things meaning, something, and right out the window it goes. So that's always super fun, basically chasing a moving target.
Exactly. I think when I first really started paying attention to my credit score and understanding more about like investing and how people other than me view my money, and other than people I'm paying direct bills to view my money and what that means to them, was I listened to, I don't even know how I found this podcast. I stumbled across a podcast that talked about the Equifax breach. Was it Equifax?
Yeah, it was Equifax.
Yeah. And so she was talking about that and how much of a mess it is beyond just like, oh, they made this enormous error and lost a lot of people's information. And then she was like, well, we don't even know what information they lost. It's not just social security numbers. It's not just credit scores. We don't know what they're collecting on us, and they don't tell anybody. Like, they don't have an obligation to tell the government. And they like basically convinced the hearing people, the judge or whatever, that they didn't have to. And they're like, no, that's private information. No, that's our private information, even though it's individuals' private information that we are sharing whenever we feel like it. We don't have to tell them. We don't have to tell you. You don't need to know what we have. And that was the first time that I was like, oh, shoot. I've been using Facebook to either just like get rid of things or buy things cheaper. That's one of my favorite money hacks is like I'm trying to be more sustainable in throwing less things away and buying less new things that don't need to be bought new. If I can get them used, then I'll get them used because they're still good. But it also means that sometimes I can make money. So I have this nightstand that I bought for $5 and I'm trying to sell it for $20 because I don't use it anymore. But if somebody's willing to pay me $20 for it and take it out of my house, perfect. But yeah, so I use Facebook a lot, but that also means that I have to kind of, Facebook and Craigslist, that means I kind of just have to make myself known, and Facebook has to know like what stuff I have in my house and just has like a track record of that in addition to what I'm already doing. So if I'm searching for something, then Facebook's like, oh, I'm going to give you ads for chairs because you're looking for chairs. I'm like, don't do that. Stop it. It defeats the purpose. But I really like that Facebook has that marketplace option because then I get to maybe make some money and or get things for cheap, and it feels more real than Craigslist. Craigslist has definitely taken a turn. I'm like, it feels so sketchy sometimes. I still will use Craigslist. I love Craigslist, but
yeah, that site has had a very weird past. So yeah, it's okay. Yeah, I have a couple friends who use, besides you, they use Facebook Market like heavy, like all the time. So I sold a bunch of furniture on OfferUp when we first moved down here. It was great because you take pictures, you post it, there's a slight negotiation, and they come pick it up and you get rid of it, and it makes it a lot easier to move on from things versus just throwing them in the trash. You're like, okay, I can, at least someone can get some use out of this.
Mm-hmm.
So it helped a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, I used OfferUp and LetGo, especially while I lived in Austin, because I was trying to get rid of a lot of furniture before I moved to Oregon. And so I had to sell like a dresser, a desk, a chair, and some other like larger piece of furniture, and I had to sell or get rid of all of them. And then I went home and I got rid of a bunch of stuff for my mom too. I was like, here, let's just get rid of everything you don't need that you've been putting off throwing away. Let's do this. And so I would post it on like all of the things. And I got rid of a bunch of stuff and I made a bunch of money. I remember one, you were there. I think I've talked about this story a lot. I can't remember if I've talked about it a lot with you or with Pierce, but the day that I was moving out of Austin back into my parents' house, I had a dresser in the back of my dad's truck that had been on OfferUp, Letgo, and Craigslist for like 2 weeks, and nobody had come and got it. And I had one lady that kept messaging me about it, but she wasn't coming and wasn't like super committal about it. And that morning she messaged me, was like, hey, I think I might like it. Can I come look at it? I said, well, it's actually in the bed of my dad's truck. If I can bring it to you, then yeah, can I bring it right now? Because I'm like leaving right now. And after today, I'm going to take it down and you're not going to be able to get it. And she was like, oh, I guess so. So I brought her this dresser and she said, well, I don't know. I don't know if I can take it. I said, I will give it to you for like $20 less if you take it right now. Like, it's here. I will help you carry it in. Please take this. And so I sold it. I think I was offering it for like 65 or 70, and I gave it to her for like 50 maybe. Maybe it was 40. I don't know. I gave it to her for a lot less. But my parents were like, we don't have space for it in the house. What are we going to do with it? And I was like, I just need it gone. That was my little tangent.
Just needs to be not here.
OfferUp, Letgo, and Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace are great because there's so many people getting rid of so many good things. And sometimes they're trash, but then you just skip the trash and you can go find the treasure. And sometimes people will buy your trash and think that it's treasure for them. It's great.
Yeah, it is really nice to be able to get rid of stuff and still make a little bit of money on it versus, landfilling it, which there was enough of that. So that's one of those little technology benefits to life. Like, hey, we can update this stuff and get rid of the old stuff and not just have to, waste the entire thing. Because some stuff is still in good condition. It's just time for an upgrade. And so it's a really good opportunity. So how did your family's money has grown up affect your attitude towards money as an adult? Because as you grow, it's like a lot of that residual, stuff from your parents or your family has some effect on you, whether or not good or bad.
I think it's made me personally more comfortable with having less. Like, I've always had less, and so if you tell me like you don't have enough money for that, then I'm like, okay, I'll find a way. My family's always been that way. We'll find a way to make do without or make it ourselves. So I've definitely been like, I hedge away from spending money because I know what it's like to not have money. Which there was a point in my life where I had $6 in my bank account. Had to figure out how to live on that. And so that's like that in addition to how I grew up. I'm like, nope, if you don't have to spend the money, then don't. And so I'm just more cautious with it. But I also my family doesn't, as far as I know, is not invested in anything. And I have no idea what retirement looks like for my parents because both of them have been self-employed or employed for like very, 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 very small companies for as long as I can remember. My dad used to work for Honda, and so that was bigger, but that was a long time ago. So thinking about their retirement and seeing them getting in their years and having no idea what retirement looks like for them, that makes me more cautious on the flip side too, where I'm like, I need to be taking whatever money I have and putting it towards my future because I would like to eventually retire and I would like to not be freaking out about money, which is why I think I've had more than one job in my life multiple times because I want control over that portion of my life. What about you?
Mom's side is more, okay, can we actually afford this versus, all right, can we get it? Because those are different things. Just because there's money in the account doesn't mean something can be afforded. And so I'm a really mixed bag. So the things that fall into my hobbies, I'm much more likely to just spend the money and deal with the bill later, right? But if there's more quote unquote necessities around the house, I'm more, okay, can we get a cheaper version of this or can we get a nicer version of this? Is that actually affordable, or is it just, okay, we're just going to throw this money away or we're just going to forego getting that altogether. And it's weird. It probably should be the opposite direction. I probably should be more just get it for the necessities, and can I really afford it for my hobbies? But I'm not. Something I'm working on. Trying to, that way I can actually start saving and have maybe a retirement of some sort. But yeah, I have to tone down the hobby spending a little bit, would help in the future. We got houses and things coming up that might be good to have money for. So
one of the phrases I've heard and read is pay your savings account first, then pay your bills, then the rest is hobby money, or like whatever you want money. That's just free spending. But first is savings, so you decide like how much of my paycheck do I want to save as soon as you get paid, put that in savings, then you pay all your bills, then whatever's left is fun money. So one of my hacks that I am not super consistent about, but it's like helped me to just be more aware of how much I'm spending, is using like a money tracking app like Mint. So I use Mint. We are not sponsored by Mint. That is just like what I use. And they work pretty well. And so it just tracks like all of my accounts, how much money I'm spending, where it's going. And I need to go in and like edit it every once in a while because it's like, you spent $30 on food at Chevron. I'm like, no, that was gas. That's not food. And just little things like that. So I need to like keep a close eye on it and monitor it. But that helps me set up budgets for myself, and it lets me create allowances for myself. So I know if I spend like $30 on food for my cat a month, and then I get a deal on it one month, then I remember later because it's like, oh, you have leftover money from 2 months ago. You can go get him extra toys or something. I'm like, dope. I'm gonna do that.
I've used Mint. I've used a couple other ones, and I just don't stick with it, which is kind of a problem. It's like, okay, just because you do have to maintenance them, because just because your bank says you spent it on a certain thing, if you didn't spend, like you said, you spent gas, not food, you have to make sure you're adjusting those categories. So yeah, it's like I'm never consistent about it, which is kind of a thing I have to get better at because it's just too many times where I'm like, maybe. But now we're going to be moving soon, so we really have to start thinking about how we're spending money a lot more, and maybe saving, maybe going on a honeymoon next year after all this foolishness is over. That might be a big thing. Kind of need to save some money for that, so I'm gonna have to get on that. And I think I'll go back into trying Mint, because that was kind of the one I liked the most out of all the ones I've used. So I think I might go back to that one.
It's got some glitches to it, but like overall, it was very helpful, because there's sometimes like trying to write it down myself. I don't remember. I don't see all those charges because I'm getting charges from different places. Like I have some stuff that's still connected to my PayPal, and that's a regular bill. Like I pay my phone bill through PayPal. And so I don't see that. And I don't remember that. That's just like an automatic withdrawal. I don't check PayPal hardly ever. So I need to have it somewhere that it will show up. And so it's been really helpful to be like, oh shoot, what did I spend $20 on? Where did that come from?
Yeah, that's what. So I've been doing it by hand. A lot of the calculation I have been doing, I just have a little note card, and once every couple months I'll go and I'll write down the new balances and everything. But there's always the things you forget, or oh crap, I didn't check that other account, so suddenly I haven't tracked that I spent this or this. So, or I have Excel sheets. I have so many Excel sheets for different things. I got to figure out. I got to get better about that. Maybe get down to one or two. I think I have 4 or 5 different ones. That way things are a lot easier to follow, because that's one of the things I find pretty difficult, is when you're not really paying attention, or you have too many spots, and so you've tracked one thing over here and then one thing over here, and like, the numbers don't add up. That kind of defeats the entire purpose of trying to track anything. So yeah, trying to stay organized is probably the hardest part of this entire thing for me.
Yeah, that's one of the hard parts about being an adult and making more money, is that you have to track it better. I'm like, yeah, I have more money. I'm like, but I can't. It doesn't feel like I have more money if all of a sudden it's all gone because I didn't track it right. One of the hardest things for me to track is if somebody like pays me back for something. So I pay for somebody else's meal and then they pay me back, and like doing that math, I'm like, what is the most logical way to do this? It gets real weird real quick. Or like big purchases that show up in budgets in Mint. So like I got reimbursed for my car when like they gave me a check because they classified it as total. So I had to get a reconstructed title and pay the guy to do all the work. So it showed up as like, you spent $2,000 on your car in the last year. I'm like, no, like I did, but it didn't, but it doesn't count. Like, don't count that. um, and when you go like on the app, there's a lot of limits, but when you go into the desktop version, that gives you a lot more options. That's where you can like set up allowance and you can set your budget to a different amount, something that makes sense. And that's where you can set up like for my car insurance. I pay that every 6 months, but it shows up as like you paid however much money in 1 month for your car. I'm like, that like doesn't reflect it well. So there's an option to make it like you set a certain amount aside every month, and then at the end of the 6 months, it's like, oh, and all of that money you've been saving for the last 6 months, we're counting that as one payment for car insurance. I'm like, that's what I want. So desktop version of Mint is very helpful to keep it clean and orderly and make sense. You got to use both. You can't use one or the other. What's the brokest you've ever been? I talked about how I had $6 for a week or something.
Right before I started working at Office Depot was the brokest I'd ever been, because I was doing summer school and just got a job. So I had to get gas, and I was literally getting gas like $5 at a time for a week before the next check came in, because I literally was like, okay, hey mom, I need to get $10 or $20. Like I had basically gotten groceries, so I was good on having food. So I'm like, okay, I just got to get to class. And then at one point I was like, I can't even afford gas. I'm just going to go take the bus. So I was just taking the bus, which was free when you're a student. So you just take the bus wherever you need to go. And when I discovered that, I was like, oh, thank God, because it was getting rough. And I was like, well, my car's just going to sit here. So I was just taking the bus. And then the next week when I first got the job, I was like, all right, I was driving. I was screwed. I'm just take the bus. So I took the bus for 3 weeks, got paid, and like, okay, finally I can put gas in my car. I would have to leave 2 hours ahead of time to get to class on time, because the bus had to go the longest route apparently ever to get there, and they were doing construction, so a lot of the stops weren't open. So I was having to go a long way around to class, and then the bus ride to work was a lot more straightforward. It was basically right down the street, but getting to class was 2 transfers in the middle of downtown Austin, which was sketchy to say the least. So yeah, I was doing that for a while, but once I got that first paycheck, I'm like, okay, I could get get everything set back up. So that was the worst time. And it was like a 3-week period. I'm like, I don't know how I'm supposed to do this, because it was the summer, so loan money was gone. At least rent was paid. I paid rent like a bunch ahead, and I got groceries. So I'm like, I can eat and I have a place to live, but I still have to get to class and get to work. So that was the best. Yeah, that was stressful.
I think having those stressful times really like prepares you. All that to say, money is stressful. I do not feel like I've ever been prepared for it, but I'm trying. The older I get, the more I try to learn, day by day,
Yep, right
as
there
much
with
as I don't want to. Yeah, so you guys should let us know your favorite money hacks, or the brokest you've ever been, or just bemoan the state of money with us. And yeah, we'd love to hear from you. We've got our Instagram, that is Coffee Side Chats, and we have Facebook and Twitter, which is Coffee Side Chat. So let us know what you think of the show. Ask us any questions. We always like to hear from you. And we're gonna go. This is good talking to you.
Later. All right.
Bye.